Hello and welcome everyone to this afternoon's live. I'm going to check on the YouTube screen real quick to see if we actually have my visual aid, and we do. That is wonderful. Okay, yay, I successfully did a thing. Isn't it exciting? Slowly but surely, I am figuring out how the doohickey works. But before I get into the topic I want to discuss this afternoon, I have to give a huge shout out to my friend and colleague Georgia Liberty of the channel Wiccan Conservative. She did an awesome live stream earlier this afternoon. Absolute rock star quality and well worth your checking out. There's a link in the description box below. And also, if you are a parent, what she says might have particular relevance for you today because it's wild out there, and I think there's some pretty bad actors there who think that they are far more qualified to be in charge of your children than you are. So. Georgia brings a few things to people's awareness, so I definitely think it would be very worthwhile, particularly for anyone who has children in their lives who they care about, to uh, give this a listen. Hear what she has to say. So definitely trot over to her channel and let her know your impressions. Watch the live stream, and just give what she says a think. A little bit of reflection. Also, while we're still talking about the description box, there is a link to join our gilded group, Blackbird's Brew. So if you are interested in talking to me and other pagan content creators, this is a place where we congregate. A lot of us have our own member spotlight channels to where you can see links to our own personal work, as well as a handy dandy place to leave us messages if you're wanting to talk about something specific. We'll see it and you'll be able to interact with us and have more of a one-on-one conversation. So if you're interested in that, link in the description box below. Also in the description box is a link to the video that actually inspired today's live stream. The video is titled, "Does Anyone Else Feel Like Everything Has Changed?" The channel that produced this video is called Stephen Antonioni. If I mispronounced that, my apologies. This is a pretty big channel. According to what I saw, he has over 108,000 subscribers. So I'm not responding to his video with any expectations whatsoever that he'll be coming to see this live stream and hear what I have to say and then having a dialogue and a good back and forth on the topic. I'm not expecting that. But the reason why I wanted to react to it is because I think he is in a position of so many other people to where he is seeing that something is kind of off about the world. He's trying to process it. We'll talk a little bit as I go on in the live stream about, how he's trying to give himself some perspective. But I feel like there are still people who are in his shoes. So apparently there are people who are still awakening to what's going on. And speaking of awakening, I have just awakened to the presence of dear Amanda Cox, aka Puritan View, who has confirmed that she will be joining Georgia Liberty and I on Thursday's live stream. So definitely come back for that. Much love to you, Amanda. Um, but yes, when I saw the video title for this person and when I started to listen to his video, the first image that popped into my head was the tower card from the tarot. And I think it just perfectly encapsulates what so many people are feeling and experiencing and perceiving in the world. And of all the cards in the tarot, I think this one might be the most self-explanatory. We have a tower whose top has exploded off. There appears to be a zigzaggy lightning going into it. We have people jumping out, falling out. There's rocks below. It's not a fun day, not a fun day at all. It's a card that represents that everything has just gone kablooey and that there's nothing you can do about it. The kablooey is going to happen. The natural and logical consequences are going to unfold, and you're going to have to wait until the dust settles a little bit in order to decide what to do next. So it is about rather violent, abrupt change, that is, inevitable change, but it's also about consequences, about what are the consequences for our own self sustained illusions and our delusions of grandeur or our our inability to face the world as it is and trying to escape into romanticism or into our ideological preferences of how we think it ought to be as opposed to how it actually functions. But it's also about faithlessness. It is about being confronted with contradictions. And it's also about the results of short sightedness. So I feel like it's really very relevant, and we'll be referring back to it as we go on. So, in this gentleman's video, he began by discussing how things were during his childhood and adolescence in the 90s and the 2000s. He was growing up, things were a certain way, and it's quite different now. And I think that the changes are pretty undeniable, especially for those of us who are of similar age. I'm a few years older than he is. I was in my, actually, I graduated in 2000. So, I remember it. I probably remember those years a little bit better than he does just because I was older. The world was a complete contrast to what it is today. I mean, for one thing, there was actually still some privacy in the world. We didn't have this up in your face, constant, ever present social media in which there's just no privacy. You weren't always on display because right now I feel that we are living lives in which we are essentially always in public. And even if we're not scrolling through the social media, just because we have all of these various devices that apparently someone's always listening to, if we are to go by how well timed and how coincidental some of the advertisements that come through on our various devices seem to occur. Definitely, it does seem that we are never quite alone, at least not when we are around our technology. We're always there. And what's even more disturbing is that now we live in a world in which there seems to be a digital copy or footprint of everything we say, do, and think. And that's really alarming. And that's definitely not how I grew up. It's not how the person who did the video grew up. We didn't have that. That just was not something that existed. To a certain extent, if you did something cringy as a teenager, it could eventually be forgotten. You could outlive the embarrassment of your adolescence. And now, I mean, people have permanent records. Everything from the moment they step onto social media is just like this ongoing permanent record, and we've only begun to see the psychological consequences for that. But another difference between, the 90s, 2000s, and today was that we did still have some degree of cultural cohesion. There, at least, there wasn't a widespread sentiment amongst people in general that the institutions that kind of formed the framework for our society. We didn't feel like they were hostile towards us. We might disagree with them. We might disapprove of how they conducted business. We might think that some needed to be reformed, perhaps some needed to be dismantled, but we didn't feel hated. We did not feel hated by these institutions that were essentially created to serve us. Oh, and I see Georgia's joined us in the chat and her computer crashed. She had to reinstall about she had to Oh, good grief. That is horrible, Georgia. Apparently, it unsubscribed her from every channel. It unmodded her as well. Here, we're going to take a wee break from my train of thought, and I'm going to restore my moderators because holy cow. Let's see. Got Georgia, and I've got Amanda on there. So okay. We should be all right now. Oh, I hate machines. Technology. As if we weren't already in the middle of ranting and raving. You guys, you should have your moderation little wrenches now. But back to what I was saying. The thing about today is that we are living in an environment of absolute hostility. And it isn't just individuals being hostile towards each other, because there's always going to be some friction amongst people in society, if for no other reason than just people have different personality types. And let's be real, not all personality types gel well together. I mean, that's just a reality of human existence. But it's different now. It's almost like this, like there can be no reprieve, no common ground, nothing of that sort. It's absolutely maddening. And and people keep whining and complaining about how, well, no one seems to trust all of these institutions anymore. And I'm thinking, why are you asking the question? Why are you framing the issue from that direction? Because even in this gentleman's video, that's kind of the approach he was taking. There was some faith in the institutions. And I'm thinking, the problem isn't that people have lost faith in them. The problem is that these institutions have demonstrated through their actions and been exposed through some people's reporting that they are utterly unworthy of trust. And that's a much different problem. And I would argue that it's a much more serious problem. Now, I'm not one to trust organizations. My own personal life experience has said, that's really not a good way to go. That's a pretty confirmed pathway to disaster. But I think it is possible to have institutions and organizations that aren't that don't hate the people around them, that aren't trying to completely lord it over them, that are trying to serve a useful function. But I have to acknowledge that even though that would be the ideal situation, that's not what we're dealing with today. Now, after laying the groundwork for all that, the host in the video, he said that he actually turned to three different books to try to give himself and his audience a little bit of perspective and at least a framework with which to analyze, all the things that we're seeing going on in the world. So he drew attention to the book The Fourth Turning by William Strauss and Neil Howe, also How the World Really Works by Vaclav Smil, and see, the last book he turned his attention to was The Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. Now, I have not read these books myself. I've heard of some of them referenced, so I'm familiar with some of the consequences, but I don't want to give you the impression that I know them chapter and verse. And the same goes for this Stefan Antonini. You know, this is the first video of his I've ever seen. I'm not subscribed to his channel. I haven't seen any of his other work. I don't know. I'm not familiar at all with any of his opinions, his worldview, politics, anything of that nature. I'm just reacting to this video as a self-contained thing. After referencing these three books, he said that he'd had three different keys that he really took away from them. The first was memory, the second was gnosis, and the third was economy or money manners. So, when it comes to the fourth turning and memory, it had everything to do with cycles. He asked, what if happened if we were not familiar with the cycles of the season and suddenly autumn came around and all the leaves died and they fell off the trees? That could be very alarming for someone who didn't realize that, the tree would sleep through the winter and then the leaves would regrow in the spring and it would be in full leaf in the summer, and that the cycle would go on and on and on. And he says that part of the issue that comes from this is that those of us today, the last time the world saw trouble on this kind of global scale, on a really massive way that could be destructive, as in the sense of world wars, well, we'd have to go back to, the 19 teens and also the 1940s. And a lot of the people who experienced those times and lived through that history, well, mortality has claimed them. They are no longer with us. So it has left living memories. So those of us in the world and the people who have power within the world, they by and large are not individuals who have ever experienced the kind of massive crisis that those previous generations did. And so, that in at least in part explains some of the rather poor decision making and poor impressions and the inability to cope with our world changing, just because we don't have a frame of reference for things going wrong on this kind of scale, not within the course of our own experience. And one thing the man in the video brought out that I think was pretty astute, he said that, it's very difficult to understand history if you have not lived it yourself. And I think there is some truth to that. I mean, there are certain situations we cannot understand until we have walked that path. So I do think that he is right in what he says about that. Another thing about the fourth turning is that the emphasis on cycles is essentially that meme we keep seeing all over social media of strong men make good times make weak men make hard times, and hard times make strong men. And then after that point, you have this issue of crisis. And he's very disturbed by this idea of inevitable crisis that the authors William Strauss and Neil Howe really discussed. I find that concept a lot less disturbing because I see it as a reflection of the natural order. I don't know how many times in various pagan videos the principle has been emphasized about how human beings are not set apart from the natural order. We are within it. We function within it. We have a job to do within that natural order, and we are also subject to the same cycles that everything else in existence is subject to. So I don't really see that this cycle of four generations, or this cycle of seasons, as being something that we need to try to avoid. I think we need to learn how to handle it better when it comes, no matter where we're at in that cycle. But I think we need to let go of the illusion that it's something that could be stopped, and we could just create this solid, wonderful world in which there was just perpetual peace and security and harmony and brotherhood and love and all of the sweet, warm, fuzzy things with lollipops and rainbows and unicorns and kittens and all, the cupcakes with sprinkles. I think we need to let go of that kind of childish naivete and childish idealism. I think we need to start relearning the ability to address the world as it is. And that includes embracing every aspect of that larger cycle, whether we are accepting the crisis at the end of a time of in which weak men are in charge and weak men are making very bad decisions, and that's creating instability and learning how to deal with that, or if we are just dealing with this yearly struggle of the winter. We need to learn to embrace these things because they're going to exist either way. And if we are not learning how to cope with them properly, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. So, from a purely practical, pragmatic standpoint, I think that would be the healthier attitude to adopt. The next book he referenced was How the World Really Works. That's by Vaclav Smil. And he brought in the idea of gnosis. Now, first he defined the word gnosis as it's coming from the Greek, referring to knowledge, but not just any old knowledge. It's knowledge that he described as being of an elevated degree, something that is higher, more complex, deeper, something that isn't just kind of something that goes beyond the general 2 plus 2 equals 4 basics when it comes to information. And the premise of Vaclav Smil's World book was really that people are existing in the world without any idea of what it takes in order to both create and maintain a civilization. We don't understand the prerequisites, the things upon which we depend. They lack that knowledge. And point of interest, the 4 materials most vital to our continued existence in a civilized society, according to this author, are ammonia, plastic, steel, and cement. And so the question is raised if people don't understand what the building blocks are, let alone their necessity, let alone what the consequences would be if you try to eliminate them from the equation, then people are really in no position to make sensible decisions about how to proceed going forward. And we certainly see this reflected in the environmental movement. You know, how many people go in there fairly blindly saying, oh, these people have good intentions. They're just wanting to take care of the planet. They're just wanting to take care of things. But they're not really examining and critically thinking about any of the information presenting them. They're just taking it on faith, at face value. They're saying, well, they have good intentions, therefore nothing could be wrong. Well, apparently, we need to remember that old saying that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think we need to bring that back up into the public consciousness because if we remembered that, we would know that while it's preferable for people to have good intentions, but if those intentions are not actually good in and of themselves, they just believe that they are, it will cause problems. If people have good intentions but poor methodology, then there's going to be problems. If people have good intentions, but they don't understand the consequence of what happens if their ideas are put into practice, then that will cause problems. And that's what we're really experiencing. And it's why it's so difficult to really get anywhere, whether we're talking about environmental discussions or about the role of technology or the role of government or anything else. Amanda. Amanda says, I think we've built a world of avoidance to our own doom. Oh, 1,000%. That is absolutely the issue. A world of avoidance, particularly the avoidance of consequences and responsibility. People are absolutely obsessed with, well, okay, I'm in a bad spot. How can I get out of it? Not what did I do to create it? And if there's accountability that needs to take place or punishment that needs to take place, maybe it's my duty to accept that. You know, where do you hear the people preaching that? Because that's a message that would be pretty useful. And because people are no longer taking responsibility and they're just avoiding problems and trying to ignore everything out of existence, it is really preventing them from fully be developing as a human being, from fully claiming their adulthood, and from being of any practical use to anyone in society. And that really ties in a little bit to the next point I wanted to bring up. So excellent timing. I appreciate that, Manda. One of the things both the man in the video and the author of the book talked about was our reliance upon technology, but our complete ignorance of how that technology actually works and why it works. And so, of course, we aren't suited to make decisions because we don't even fully understand the capabilities of what the technology that we currently have existing and available to us, all of the ways it can be applied, all of the ways it can be used, all the ways in which it is being used. Now, and I think that plays a role because we are in this state of we know how to use the toy, but we don't know how or why the toy works. I think this in part explains why we are seeing people exist in this state of a psychological, perpetual adolescence. If you think about adolescence, and for me, this is now many years ago, but when someone's in an adolescence, they're not wholly ignorant and wholly naive the way a small child is. They have accumulated enough information and enough skills and capabilities to almost get by, not quite really, but they're starting to get a little bit too big for their britches, and they think they're ready to take on the world. It must be marvelous to have that kind of confidence. You certainly seldom see it as people get older, but I think that's because we're wiser. Um, but here's the thing, as much knowledge as what some of these kids have, they don't have wisdom, and they have very little experience to draw upon. And I would say that that is one of the major things we have really missed out on in our society. We have information. We have information everywhere. There's no escaping it, but we do not have wisdom. And people are not really making use of their experience. I mean, how many people do we see going through this cycle of doing the same dumbass thing that they did the year before, and either thinking it will be okay, or that the result will be different, or that there's just no other way to go through it? I'm thinking, isn't that amazing? People have this weird desire to try to control things that are beyond their control, but they will refuse to exercise control over things that are within their purview, beginning with their own impulses, beginning with their thought processes, beginning with their words and their actions. No one wants to take hold of those particular reins. I want to tell the rest of the world what to do, but I'm not going to sort out my own life. It seems like these people would benefit from reading a little bit of Jordan Peterson or listening to some of his lectures. He has some solid observations, that man. And I think this is, if I was going to have one criticism of this man's video, I would say that he had missed the role and the need for wisdom. I think that something should have been brought out, because it isn't enough to have gnosis. It isn't enough to have some understanding of some things. It isn't even enough to have good, solid information about the most vital aspects of life. Without wisdom, we're only going to get so far, and we're still going to make really, really poor decisions, because we're not exercising wisdom, which means we're not taking into account some of the realities of life. We're probably still more prone to being ideologically driven and being blind to anything that's factual or that continues to exist in reality that doesn't fit in with our own personal narrative. I think that also explains a little bit of the state of our world. Next, the man in the video, he turned his attention to money matters, and that took him to the book The Changing World Order by Ray Dalio. Dalio also took some ideas about cycles from the fourth turning, but he wasn't just focused on generational shifts. He was looking at the rise and fall of world powers, which he said goes in about a 250-year cycle. And at the end of that cycle, you always see massive economic instability, if not outright collapse, that results in a shift of world power. Sometimes civilizations collapse. There's political chaos. There's upheaval of all sorts. And this was probably the most disturbing thing for the man in the video. It's because he's observing that right now, the same as all of the rest of us. And it is frightening. I'm not going to pretend like, we're in the middle of a picnic here, and that if we just exercise some positive thinking, everything will take care of itself. No, I think we need to have a very realistic view of where we are in the stream of time. But where I think we really, really miss it is that we're not looking at what else this kind of chaos can yield. Now, before I get too much further into that particular train of thought, I want to mention the host's his own personal conclusions. He said that as he was examining these books and the ideas within him and comparing them with what was going on in the world, it persuaded him that his feelings that everything has changed and something is off, that there is a basis for that feeling in objective reality. It isn't just something that's going on inside his own head or a problem of his own personal perceptions. And he essentially left the audience with that same question. Are they also experiencing that feeling that something isn't right, something's off, and that we need to be aware of this, and we need to start acting in accordance with the reality of the world in which we live? So it was kind of this open-ended thing, and I felt like he was wanting to start a broader conversation. And in the comment section, you did see some people, have a few things to say, but I mean, let's face it, typing out a few things in a comment section, that's not exactly, a free for all discussion. And, really this live stream isn't a free for all discussion either, but I am doing what I can to contribute to the conversation. But now that we've gone through his thoughts, I want to bring this back to our tarot card, the Tower, because the feelings he has described, the patterns of history that he outlined, it is essentially the same thing that we are seeing in this card. That feeling of things falling out from under your feet and there being nothing you can do about that. It's going to happen. It's going to take place because conditions in our world have indeed changed. But I don't think it's just external factors that are different. I think what has really changed even more so and gone a really radical shift is our own personal perceptions. Our illusions about the world, our illusions about ourselves are being shattered one by one. And the real struggle isn't so much of adapting to the changed world. It's adapting and coming to terms with what is actually real and acknowledging that our perceptions were not exactly aligned with what was going on. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but sometimes we need to set aside what those reasons are and just start observing what there is to observe and saying, I am acknowledging this reality. I am dealing with this reality. I am making my plans accordingly. And that's a really hard shift. I think that's where a lot of people get stuck on a really emotional loop. It's that they struggle so much with this shattering of their ideals and this that they can't get quite to the point where they're dealing with the more practical aspects of where they're at. So definitely something to think about and try to move beyond if we find ourselves in those particular shoes. Um, but as I look at this card and as I think about the discussion, what we are experiencing is a society that is essentially operating as a pressure cooker, and that pressure cooker is on the verge of explosion. Ah, yeah, Amanda, the tide has come in over our own sandcastles. Boy, isn't that the truth? That is exactly the same kind of feeling here. And, one thing about being inside of this own pressure cooker is that we are all under pressure to some degree. And when people are under pressure, they start revealing who they truly are. And that could be very useful because it lets us know who we can rely on and who we can't. But also, we're out being confronted in the mirror every day. And a number of people in the past couple of years, especially, have discovered that there is a profound disconnection and contradiction between their self image that they had psychologically of themselves, who they believe themselves to be, and their conduct of what they actually do when they are put to the test. And a lot of people are not handling that well. Hence why we are in the midst of a society that is experiencing a massive existential crisis. And for proof of that, we can just observe what's going on around us every single day and watch how people are reacting to it and just watch some of the insanity and fallout on social media. People are not okay. And it's because they are unwilling to let go of their illusions in order to embrace the reality of what is. They're not considering the possibility that they were, and this is a horrible thing, that they were wrong, mistaken, in error, that they had absolutely, positively missed the boat. The wrong ideas were in their head. The world is not what they thought that it was, and they are just not dealing with it. Then we have people in a deep stage of denial. And there's not a whole lot to be done to help them until they are willing to re-examine that denial. And, I mean, some people are really self sabotaging right now because they are not willing to make that leap. So I think that the trick of this, which I referenced slightly before, is for us to learn how to see the opportunities that are within this time of crisis and to seize this opportunity. Because thus far, by and large, it's been the people who have the worst ideas that have been, gaining ascendancy. And I maintain that's because the people with good ideas have not actually seized any opportunities. They are not leading. They are being reactive or worse, passive, which is not helping. People are so focused on doing damage control and, putting band-aids everywhere instead of realizing that what we need is some major surgery of our ideas. We need to reject the bad ideas and the bad actions that have created our larger problems to begin with. It requires rejecting wholesale, complete ideologies that have track records written in the victims of. the blood of their victims. We need to, to stop making excuses for bad ideas. Stop making excuses saying, "Oh, well, that wasn't real X, Y, and Z." Yes, it was. Yes, it was. It was real. You just don't want to accept that it was real. This is that same psychological adolescence I was talking about earlier in this stream. People don't want to grow up. They want things to be their little lovely adolescent fairyland. They want things to be what they want them to be. They are not accepting what is. We have got to start growing up. And until we do, that tower that we're looking at right now is going to continue to fall. And we've got to accept that sometimes the solution is not propping up the tower, but it's allowing gravity to take its course. Let it fall. It deserves to collapse. It was weak. It had anything good about it, anything that held up that structure. It was removed piece by piece, and now we are seeing the consequences of that action. The longer we draw it out, the worse it is. So if we want to do anything with band-aids, what we need to be doing is ripping those bitches off and just letting the chips fall where they may. After that, that's when we can clear out the rubble. That's when we can have clearer vision. And that's when we can build something stronger, something better in the place of the old tower and have it actually be worthwhile and serve a function instead of just serving the illusion of having a function. But what we can't do in the midst of all of this is to be passive or reactive. We really need to cultivate the inner fires of a creator, to have that passion of an artist, the ideas of a visionary, and the skills of a builder. In short, what we are needing right now, more than anything else, in order to confront the challenges and survive and thrive and come out the other end, is to have an elemental balance of fire, water, air, and earth within ourselves. Wholeness, having wholeness as a person, gaining wisdom through experience, being open to the nudges from divinity, and having a healthy marvel of the universe itself, and trusting that ultimately things go as they should, allowing the cycles to unfold. The most destructive cycle still serves a useful function. Sometimes that destructive cycle is getting rid of things that need to go. Let it. Stop fighting it. Allow the corruption to die. Allow the old structure to fall. Allow the things that cannot support us and have proven they cannot support us to go. Release it. Let it go. And the more we do this, the more we stop putting our faith in these false saviors, these overarching institutions that we think we can just farm out our own responsibilities to, the more we abandon these things and leave them to their fate, the more we are going to be working towards improving ourselves as human beings overall, but also improving ourselves by improving our actions, by pursuing excellence in all that we are, in all that we do. And the more people you have doing that, the faster you are going to see a society reconstitute itself. But more importantly, it will result in a stronger foundation for the next cycle. And Amanda, I think you're exactly right. You put that beautifully. Fire purifies precious metals. We are in a period of refinement. This is our generation's task. Let's rise to the challenge. Our I suppose it's really our great grandparents, at least for people of my age, who were the ones who actually became the greatest generation, fought and won World War II. Let's see if we can live up to their legacy. Let's find out what we are really made of. And if we find that we're made of weak materials, let's replace those materials with something better. That is something that is within our own power to do. You want to talk about reclaiming your power and seizing your agency? Start there. That's what it's actually for. Get past all the platitudes and the bromides and all the bullshit memes that are essentially trying to lull people into a state of stagnation. Actually take charge of yourself, own yourself, and make yourself what you want to be. Know your natural inclinations and make the most of them. You have strengths. Discover them if you don't know what they are. If you have weaknesses, learn how to shore those up and surround yourself with people who have strengths that make up for your weaknesses. You can forge community that way. I mean, my goodness, look at my friends and colleagues. We have a Georgia Liberty, if we can conservative. We have Amanda Cox, aka Puritan View, who's with me in the chat right now. Both of them have qualities that make up for my own personal deficiencies, and I am thankful for that every single day. That's how we're coming together. That's how we're fusing the community, and that's how we're all joining this fight for civilization together. We're looking about what we can do in the short term while also looking at that long term, thinking, okay, we don't want to just rebuild a house made out of sticks and straw. We want to build something worthwhile that can last to where maybe there's a greater period of time in between the next cycle of the bad. Let's be that generation of people who did something worthwhile with their time and did something more than just take up space on the earth. So, those are my thoughts, both on the substance of the video. That, again, the link for that is in the description box below. But it's also my thoughts about how we essentially rescue ourselves and rescue civilization itself. We aren't necessarily going to save everything that we were accustomed to growing up with, but we can certainly preserve good principles, and we can certainly build upon those principles going forward. So, yeah, those are my thoughts. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you happen to miss the live stream, or better yet, come visit us on Gilded. Again, there is a link to join us in that description box. You will have to fill out an application form, but that's just to keep out some of the riffraff. And once you're among us, have these conversations with us. Let's put our heads together. Let's think about this. Let's examine what's going on through as many different angles as what is humanly possible, so that we can start strengthening each other and start giving each other the courage to be those leaders who take charge of the future and say, you know what, I'm going to help shape this too. We're not just going to have all the bad people with the bad character and the bad ideas doing the shaping. We are going to make ourselves felt as well. So, hope to see you soon. And again, if you have not checked out Georgia Liberty's live stream from today, please do so. She's an absolute rock star. I think it's probably the best live stream she's ever done. I think it's the best video she's ever done. She was on absolute fire today. So please go over to her channel and give her some love. But that'll do it for now. Thank you, everyone who watched. Thank you, Amanda, for being with me. Thank you, Georgia, for popping in. So much appreciated. I will see everybody later.